Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. Today's episode is brought to you by Next Placement, which is Career Club's most recent innovation in the outplacement space, where we are helping the whole person, not just a cell on a spreadsheet, by bringing mental wellness and emotional intelligence coaching, as well as community to employees who find themselves in transition. If you happen to be watching this episode on YouTube, please subscribe, like, comment. And for anybody who happens to be catching this on your favorite podcast platform, reviews and ratings definitely help. And you can always subscribe to that as well. I'm really excited about today's guest. I got to meet our guest at the SHRM conference in June in Las Vegas. And John Ferguson, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at NASCAR, gave a phenomenal talk. And he's dynamic, charismatic, and the content was better than good. So with that, John, welcome to today's episode.
Hey, Bob, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today. I am here in sunny Daytona Beach, Florida, where it is hot. I tell you
hot.
Hot, Bob.
Well, I tell you what was hot. Your talk was hot. You did a great job. You were just commanding the stage, and I was hanging on every word. And I don't always say that at conferences, but you definitely knocked it out of the park. So before we dive into our topic today about creating a very people-centric culture, what I wanted to do is what we usually do, is just a little bit of an icebreaker to help folks get to know you a little bit. So to start off with an easy one, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina.
And you were raised there as well?
Oh, yeah. I was there until I finished undergrad.
Awesome. And well, that'll lead to the next question. Where'd you go to undergrad, John?
Furman University. Go Paladins.
Come on. And that sounds like maybe you also have a postgraduate degree?
I do. So when I left Greenville, South Carolina, where Furman is located, I was a poli-sci major. So it made sense to go to the nation's capital. And that is what brought me to Washington, D.C. And that's where I got my MBA at the Howard University.
Come on. And then a little bit about your family, and I mean both your children, but you told a great story about the family that you grew up in. So just roll with that for a minute, please.
I will. So originally from Greenville, South Carolina, I grew up in a multi-generational household. I have an older brother. We're 12 years apart. And then, of course, my mom and my dad. They instilled a lot of values in us, but we were able to live with baby boomers, Gen X, and then you have me as a millennial in the same household. So there's a lot of good life lessons and skills there. When I moved to DC, I met my wife, Dr. John Ferguson. She's most recently was a professor at Howard University, and we have since grown our family. We have two beautiful daughters.
That is awesome. So you're at NASCAR now. How long have you been there? And just a little bit of your backstory, your career arc.
Perfect, Bob. So I've been with NASCAR now for 2 years. It'll be, just shy of 2 years. It'll be 2 years in September. And it has been life in the fast lane since I've gotten here. Many good pit stops, one of which was the SHRM annual conference, where I had the opportunity to present, not only to represent myself, but also represent the good stuff that we're doing here at NASCAR. Prior to joining NASCAR, I was in Washington, D.C., where I was there for about 14 years. And that was where I started my career with Hyatt Hotels, working for Hyatt Regency Washington. And then I left there and went to Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Monumental Sports and Entertainment is the home of the Washington Wizards, Capitals, and Mystics. We own a couple of arenas. We had esports. We had AFL at one point in time. So if you're wondering, yes, I have a Stanley Cup championship ring from the Washington Capitals. And I also have a WNBA championship ring when the Mystics won the championship in 2019. So my sports career has been full of excitement and fun. And I'm excited to be here with NASCAR today, specifically because we're celebrating 75 years of driving in the fast lane.
Wow. Well, congratulations. You've obviously already had a great career and you're just getting started. So it's exciting to watch. And then just a little bit, what do you said you have two daughters. What do you like to do when you're not at work?
Oh, when I'm not at work, sometimes I just like to sit down and be quiet. But I will say we spend a lot of time outside. Florida, you get generally good weather year round. So going to the pool. I've recently picked up the hobby of fishing. More than I ever did. So I like to go get some live bait and go fish by the lake that's in our neighborhood and just have a good time. So for me, it's really about just some downtime because work can be demanding, travel can be demanding. So When I do have moments to step away, I want to make sure that I'm present with my family and present with my two daughters, but also just creating lifelong memories as a family.
No, that's a legacy right there, isn't it? Like that's what people you really value is those memories. So yes, yes. And then
You'll look
I've,
up
I've
one
heard,
day, and your kids don't want to hang out with you anymore. I read a study the other day that said the first 10 years of your kid's life, you are their best friend. And after that, they start getting interests that are outside the home and other people. And so I want to make sure I capitalize on that moment.
Well, as a father of four, I can assure you, you were doing the right thing. And I heard a pastor friend of mine say one time, the way kids spell love is Time. And so you're doing it.
I like that. I'm taking that one. Thank you, Bob.
That's a good one, isn't it? So just to kind of dive into our topic, you've got a very high profile, very cool job with NASCAR in HR. You said that you had started with Hyatt and then went on to Monumental. But what kind of led you into just your career in HR? Why HR?
I'll tell you, Bob, I fell into HR. As I said earlier, I was a poli-sci major. So try to make this quick. I moved to DC out of undergrad with no job. I had some connections on Capitol Hill, thinking I was going to land something in politics. None of that came to happen. And I met someone that lived in my apartment building that worked for Hyatt. He was like, hey, they have some open positions. If you want a referral, let me know. At that time, I was like, hospitality, hotels, like, nah, I don't see the fit. But when you get a bunch of no's back to back, you're like, hey, you said you could get my foot in the door, right? And so long story short, I went in for one position that they were like, you're overqualified for that one. Rightfully so. They knew having a college degree, I wasn't going to stay in a sort of convention setup position. But I said, hey, actually, the night before I came up for the interview, I was doing my research and I applied for the HR coordinator job. And they're like, oh, you'd be interested? And so lo and behold, Bob, they said, well, can you hang around a little bit? I hung around all day because I was unemployed, so I had time. And then long story short, a week later, they offered me my first full-time job in HR, and I never looked back from there.
Well, but okay, so that's interesting because, I think a lot of times we do just sort of fall into things like life happens and we don't get to orchestrate how everything happens all the time. What was it that kept you in HR? It's one thing to fall into it, it's something else to stay in it and really develop as a professional as you have. What kept you in it?
That's a good question. So I would say for me, I think about the transferable skills that I have been building throughout all of my academic career, even my undergraduate career that led to that. And I think transferable skills are the things that we all should think about. Like, it may sound like it's very regimented in this one lane, but so much of what we do can apply to other areas. So I was a student council person all throughout school, starting in elementary school. Senior, I was a student body president in high school. When I got to college, I was still in these various organizations and leadership roles. And when I think about the core function of HR, guess what you are? You're always in the know. And so when I think about being in student government, student council, we were always in the know as student advocates and speaking on behalf of the student population. So when I got there, did I initially recognize that? No. But once I got into that HR seat and started realizing how it incorporates and helps elevate an organization, I said, okay, I kind of like this. This is sort of following that pattern of leading and partnering and coaching and helping people. And I think there's a similarity in that into politics, because you're trying to represent people, you're trying to advocate on their behalf. And so that was the transferable skills that I was able to connect the dots. I will say I did peek out the window once. I thought I wanted to pursue sort of sales or revenue generating function. And there may still be that desire there. But what I really found was a good sweet spot was in HR. But there's a lot of selling that happens in HR, because I'm trying to help sell the new policies that we should get through. I'm trying to help promote our engagement survey, whatever that looks like. So it's all about engaging, helping people see something special in themselves, helping them identify how the organization can help them achieve that outcome. And then how can we partner and move forward?
So it's funny, first of all, as a seller, a professional salesperson, sales leader, yay. But there's a great book, and you probably already know this one, by Dan Pink, called To Sell is Human. Dan Pink is amazing. He's written a bunch of New York Times bestsellers. But To Sell is Human, and it's all about persuasion. And whether you're the father of two daughters, and I know that you shared that they've got very different personalities, and what motivates them is very different, right?
Yes.
But you need to be tuned into that. you serve as the glue in a lot of ways in your organization. There's multiple constituents, and being able to sell, persuade, your ideas. I mean, we're always selling. That is just sort of the nature of the beast, particularly when you're in a leadership role.
No, you're exactly right. I'll tell you a crash course that I had in selling. Many people don't know that probably my first 3 years out of undergrad, I waited tables. That was my part-time job, but that is selling at its most basic level and customer service at its most basic level. But those are some skill sets that have carried me far in my career because you learn how to read a room, just like you learn how to read a table. So you typically have 3 approaches as a server. So you have some that they want you to be a part of their dining experience. They want to be your friend. You have some that are like, no, we want you to just kind of do your job and stay out of our way. And then you have the families that come in. They want sort of a combination of that because they're trying to be efficient with their time. They're like, I got 2 screaming toddlers. We want to go ahead and place the whole order right now. Can you bring the check?
No, it's funny. I waited tables for 3 or 4 years in college also. And I think everybody should have to wait tables for a while or work in a hotel or do something that's very general public facing.
Yes.
For sure. So that's great. Those are awesome insights. I wanted to start to bridge our conversation into what you were sharing at SHRM, in terms of building a great place to work and a great place to be from, even sort of that high level. What do you mean by those 2 things?
So what do I mean by that? So that came to mind for me when I left my last organization. So I was at Monumental Sports and Entertainment for just shy of a decade. So that was home for me. I like to tell folks when I started there, I had hair, I was single, and I didn't have kids. I left, I was bald, I was married, and I had a family, a growing family. But when it came time to like those last couple of days, I started just reflecting on what the organization meant to me and how I was a firm believer that where I was going next in my career was a byproduct of the belief they had in me, the opportunities that were presented to me at Monumental to lead and grow. And so I said, this has been a great place to work, but also a great place to be from. And so what do I mean by that? A great place to work is an organization that pours into you while you're there. One that you're excited to go to work, one that you're engaged in, one that helps you follow your success path. And then when it's a great place to be from, it's an organization that was a springboard for your career. Because I'm a firm believer, sometimes to grow, we have to go. And so that doesn't mean
that's a great expression, by the way. Yeah. Sometimes to grow, we have to go.
Yes. And so, and I think sometimes when you hear someone leaving an organization, you're like, oh, what happened? That's not the case. They were great to me. We were great for each other. But we all know that the next level for me needed to be elsewhere. And so they were supportive through that transition. And so we were able to partner in that. And when you think about those organizations, just like today, I'm talking about Monumental Sports and Entertainment. They were a great place to be from. So I would encourage anywhere that I have worked typically has been that. But as long as I'm in the seat of leading the culture, being a leader in HR, that is what I want those organizations to be known for. It's a great place to work, but also a great place to be from.
Yeah, and we'll probably jump around here just a little bit, but this notion of our relationship exists beyond your dates of employment. That's a very big, and it seems to be kind of a bit more of a radical idea that it's sort of like, well, you worked here, you're not getting a W-2 from us anymore, therefore, we don't have a relationship. Steve Cadigan, who's somebody that we had on, was LinkedIn's first CHRO, and using sports, since we're talking about sports today, he made the metaphor basically of college basketball. And it used to be, and he used the example of Coach K, where you come to Duke University and you're going to be part of Duke and you get a great education, blah, blah, blah. And then John Calipari in UK come along and John Wall, and it becomes this one and done, right? I'm just trying to turn 19. That's all I'm really trying to do is turn 19, get a little bit better so I can get drafted as high as I can get drafted by the NBA. And so the value proposition changed. And Coach K wasn't advocating for that. It took him a while to come around to it. But basically, he changed his value proposition that we're going to help you become the best version of you as you launch into this next phase of your career, because we know you're not going to be here forever. and that's okay.
I agree. And so when you say those things, it's also when you think about the generational mix in the workforce today. And I think we've always heard like retention, like people need to stay here forever. That those days are going out the door now, because when you look at who's in the workplace and who's emerging in the workplace, their view of tenure, their view of long, I don't even want to use the word loyalty, but just being somewhere for a long amount of time is not the same as it once was. And so my perspective is we want you to be here for a good time, but as long as it's good for you. And if we've been a great place to be from and a great place to work, then everybody's gotten what they needed out of that equation. You were here, we poured into your toolkit, you were able to elevate, we got you to the next level, and now you're springboarding from here to something else. And that's what everybody wants in their career. You don't want to feel stagnant. You want to know that you can go somewhere, you can take those transferable skills, and you can continue to add value.
So, and again, we had talked earlier, like I'm not trying to get you to give away all of your presentation from SHRM exactly, but some of the things that you're sharing in terms of quality or attributes of great companies to work at and great cultures to be a part of, how would you describe some of those things? What are the characteristics or the hallmarks of great companies to work at?
I think, let me sit with that one for a second. I think great companies are the ones that inspire you. I think you have a leader there that ignites something in you that you want to do more. And it's not that it's not being forced. Like you naturally want to do more. Like I believe in this mission. I believe in this leadership. I understand how my work and my role ties into the goals and objectives and the KPIs for the organization. But I also think it's one where you can see the impact of your work. It's not like, hey, I'm just over here tucked in the corner and I shared it over here and I never heard anything else about it. I think it's the organizations that shine a light on their employees and let them know that, hey, you are seen, heard, and valued, and we appreciate you. Here at NASCAR, we're all about nurturing a people-first company culture. So I want to make sure that whenever we're making any decision, let's pause and let's think about who's impacted and what is the people aspect here. Because sometimes we can get so caught up in the bottom line that maybe we're not taking care of the people. I think another good attribute of organization is communication. I think all relationships have roadblocks or tripwires around communication, and that's personal and professional. And so I think if we slow down and let's revisit that, or let's make sure we're not going too fast here. Who do we need to communicate to? What do we need to communicate? And then what questions might they have? I think a good communication is typically one that has very few questions because you got all of it in there in the first pass. But even when you may have missed something, you aren't caught so off guard by the question that comes. You're like, oh, wow, that's a great perspective, Bob. Thank you for sharing. That's something either we have an answer for, or that's something that we should consider. Let us get back to you. So when I think about those moments, that is what stands out for a good organization to work for. And I think you also need to make sure that in general, you are aligned with sort of the morals and beliefs of that organization.
Yes.
Because sometimes you can come in and maybe that's just not your organization. That doesn't mean that it may be a bad place. That's just not your organization.
I really appreciate you saying that. Our mutual friend, Johnny Taylor Jr. from SHRM, we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about empathetic leadership. And he made the exact point you just made very well, which is that it's not even that it's a good culture, a bad culture. It's just not a fit for me. And that's okay, because there's still like 9 million other companies I can go work at. And that's cool. So it works for some people. It doesn't work for others. And it's not really a right or wrong, except for that last bit that you said, kind of around integrity, right? Kind of a moral compass that a company needs to have. But, sometimes leadership styles and things like that, Elon Musk may not fit everybody, right? Wanting to be insanely intense or whatever his expression is, that's cool. Some people love working at Twitter and Tesla and SpaceX, and good on them. And for other people, that doesn't fit them. So I just wanted to amplify the point that you were making. It's not good or bad. It just is. Does it fit me?
Yes. And I think sometimes, I would say my parents' generation, or at least the guidance I got as growing up was like, you get a job and you stay there. But I think sometimes when you stay somewhere, when you know that it's not aligned with who you are, or it's not allowing you to walk in your success path, you stay and you become toxic, you become complacent, you become frustrated. And I think that has greater impact throughout the organization than just saying, you know what, my time has come here. This has been fun, but I'm ready for the next stop. And I think we all have to have that perspective that we are in the drivers of our career seat, our career development. And so make sure that you sit still long enough to recognize, maybe it's time for me to venture out from here, because my needs being met? Essentially, we all want our needs met. And sometimes we recognize they're no longer being met, but there's a door open right over here that's saying, hey, Bob, come over here. We got all the needs. We got everything you want. But sometimes, depending on how we were raised, where we're from, just our perspective and our mental state, we're like, no, I got to stay right here. I want to make sure that people know that you look to your left, you look to your right, you look up, and you look down, because there could be a multitude of opportunities and open doors that you aren't paying attention to.
You make me think about a few things. One is A players want to continue to get better, right? Yes. That's a fact. And if I can continue to get better here, and I like the culture and the values and what we do and all those things are meaningful to me, awesome. I'm probably going to stay. And not even necessarily leave for more money, because money's not always the only driver. But also, if you've got A players and you're watching A players leave, it's like, okay, well, what do we need to learn? Where their needs not being met? If we can meet them, if there's a thread that runs through that, then there's a great innovation opportunity to, bring more assets to the party that, these people that we really value and don't begrudge moving on. But it is on us. If we could be providing those, are we? And if we're not, why not? Right. So there's a learning even in that what could we be doing better?
There's another article I read probably a year or so ago. It talked about hot streaks in your career. And I think that's something that when we look at the emerging generation, so millennials, Gen Z, everything that we do now with the advancement of technology is at a faster pace.
Yes.
When I was young, we had a set of encyclopedias. My daughters do not even know what a set of encyclopedias are. They're like, why did you buy all the same books? No, each one is different. And so, but when you think about that pace and that cadence that technology has gotten us, I think that also doubles back and ties into the notion that these generations, the emerging generations, are going to have shorter tenures. They're moving at a faster pace. Information is moving faster. So a hot streak in their career doesn't mean, back in the day, I was like, I'll sit here at a manager for 10 years. I'm good. No, they want to see sort of that instant gratification. How is my work contributing? How is it allowing me to elevate? And what does that elevation look like? It may not always be in title, but there was a stretch assignment. There was additional scope. And so how do we meet those employees where they are? So the hot streak is sometimes you got to strike while it's hot. And so that may mean I go to this next opportunity. But then I think when people leave, it creates room for growth for other people in that pipeline. And when I think about sports, I think we typically have here, I think more than other places, you have people that are so committed to the sport or so committed to the team and loyalty because they've always wanted that role. They've always wanted to be a part of the organization. So when they get there, they're like, I am parked. And so they grow. They're successful. But they get here. But guess what? There's a pipeline of people. There's a backlog. They're not leaving because they're like, this is the job I've wanted. I wanted to be the general manager here since I was 2. So they're not leaving. So that means there's nowhere else for someone else to grow. And so those are the notions that comes. The hot streaks, the shorter tenures will allow us to cycle through to keep up with the cadence and timing that we're seeing accelerated with technology and digital communication, social media, et cetera.
Yeah, I heard somebody say the other day, like, today is the slowest it's ever going to be. Tomorrow's going to be faster than today, and so on and so on. Today is as slow as it's going to get. And as you say, young people are digitally native. All this stuff is like the only thing they've ever known. They don't know about the World Book Encyclopedia. Why'd you buy the same book? It's funny. But I want to kind of mix a couple, 3 ideas here and let you respond. You talked earlier about great companies, are really good at communication. So that's a big thing. We've been talking a bit about multi-generational kinds of things and people coming at it differently. And then I want to kind of weave in DEI, because, the problem with diversity is you get diversity, right? So in this one example, we're talking age groups as one form of diversity, and there's a bunch of others that aren't all demographic, but just that's an easy one to pick on. Is we're not always going to agree. The problem with diversity is you get diversity, and then the follow on to diversity is inclusion. And so I want my voice to be heard. I want to actually be part of the conversation, not a checkbox on somebody's, do we have so many of these and so many of those? So thinking about communication, thinking about culture, thinking about diversity, how do you foster an environment that encourages communication without it getting shrill, mean-spirited, polarized? You know where I'm going.
So Bob, you know what you got to do there? You got to get to know your people. And that's where I'm going to say you got to lower the waterline. And that is where so the thing is, when you bring diversity together, because it's so diverse and they don't have the same lived experiences, the same upbringing, same cultural norms, everyone is starting from ground zero. So Bob, you and I have had a couple conversations now. We would not start at the same place at our first conversation, at our fifth conversation. So when you have diversity, you have to really be intentional with making sure that we get to know each other, understand your perspective. And I think the best way to do that is to lower the waterline. So one example of that is when you meet someone new, be open about yourself. If you're a new leader, be open about yourself and share, because guess what? At surface level, we may think we have very little in common. But once we get to talking, you have kids, I have kids. You do this, I do that. We both wait at tables. I mean, the things that we've learned today. So when we get into a decision-making process, you have greater understanding, greater empathy, and will have greater grace for my perspective and be open to it. I think and you have to know this. So diverse teams typically have a harder time getting out of the gate, but once they've got that chemistry together, they're shooting for the stars. Homogeneous teams, they hit the ground running, but they don't have the diversity in thought that allows them to elevate to a new level. So they can take off and keep a gradual incline. The diverse group may be slow here because they're trying to figure out their rhythm, get the harmony. But once they get it, they're taking off like a rocket. And so you have to think about the stages of group dynamics. You're forming, storming, norming, etc. You're going to spend more time forming and possibly storming as a diverse group than one that's homogeneous. So I think there's a lot there, but it's really about building relationships, lowering the waterline on yourself, be transparent, get to know people, ask them something about life that's not work related, and then listen and observe and be open to other perspectives. Because, I was just sitting here talking with my colleague Chandler, and we were sharing about, how do you get to know people? What are the different perspectives, etc. But also I asked her, I said, do you feel that you can contribute to what's happening here? So Chandler's our intern. And she's like, yes. And she said, I'm not sure if I would have always felt that way, but you all have always asked me what was my thought, what was my opinion.
Yes.
And that was good feedback for me, because in that moment, we know that sometimes you need to open the door for that. But there are some people who never get asked that question. And so are you asking that question of everyone that's around that decision-making table? Or is it one person that's dictating the conversation? You have a bunch of head nodding. You should ask the question, hey, what are your thoughts here? Especially if you're, if it's a diverse group, what are your thoughts here? Because we're all going to come to the table with something slightly different. Yes. And I think once we get all that nuance and the differences covered, we're going to give you the best recipe.
I love it. David Taylor's the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, and he told us one time, none of us is better than all of us. Isn't that a great line?
It is. You're giving me some good lines here, Bob.
Dude, I'm just a good listener. None of us is better than all of us. And, that culture of truly listening, truly trying to understand. You said two important words to me. One was empathy, right? And then the other one was relationship. And it takes time to build relationships. And you make such a great point too about the homogeneous groups getting out of the gate quickly. Sure, right? Because they can find their common threads much more easily.
Yep.
Right. But then you think about, a beautiful quilt that's got all these patterns and colors, it's probably harder to make one of those than just a solid green thing. But man, once you get that quilt, it's a work of art. It's just harder to get there, but the benefit is worth the effort. So I really like how you were sharing about that, getting out of the gate faster, slower, but hang on, because one of them is going to take you to a completely different and better place.
Yes.
So that's cool. So we talked about, the relationship extends beyond the career or our time there. And you used a line about not holding good talent hostage, which and helping people really unlock their potential. Could you unpack that idea a little bit?
Yes. So that kind of goes to, sometimes you got to go to grow. A lot of times as leaders, the top talent is probably looking to grow and possibly go. You want to keep them because everything's working well for you. But I think if you're really dedicating into in developing people and helping them reach their success path, I didn't say career path or career development, but their success path. A success path is going to be full of pivots, turns, and twists. Because where I am today, I probably would not have told you this when I finished, when I graduated from Furman University. So that was a success path that got me here. A career path is very linear, is very 1 + 1 + 1. That's not life. Life doesn't come at us like that. And so when you think about not holding good talent hostage, is knowing that I have partnered with you and you have been able to achieve this outcome. And what's better than seeing someone that you've helped either shape, mold, or guide become an expert and get to the next level? But I would even say, be better than I am. I think that's the ultimate goal for me. I don't want people to be almost as good as me. I want people to be better than me. If I could contribute to your success in that type of way, because people have done that for me. I think about my parents and what they achieved in life. They made me who I am, but I'm sure I have surpassed what they wanted for me or what they wanted for themselves. We want each generation to be better than the next. And so I think you should take that same concept into the people that you are leading in the workplace. I want you to be better than the next. I want you to be better than me. And so don't hold good talent hostage. When you see, because you can see the signs where they're looking for something else. They're looking to be stretched further. And you're probably thinking, well, the only other way you can get stretched is to take my job. Okay. And you're kind of like, well, I'm not going anywhere. But your network can help them find your job at another organization and then continue to grow and climb the corporate ladder.
Well, I tell you what, that takes a lot of courage to do that and a lot of confidence, because if you feel threatened by that, that's going to be a very challenging move for somebody to make. But I'm so glad that you referenced your parents, because as you were talking right before you said that, I was thinking, this is like being a parent. You get more joy out of seeing your children do well than you do. Any parent knows that that's a true statement. You get more joy out of seeing your children do well. And as a leader, I get great joy out of seeing my teammates or my clients do well. I mean, that makes me really happy. I get a little bit of a dopamine when I'm doing okay, but when somebody that I've poured into takes off, it doesn't get better than that.
Yes, I think I've shared before, like my daughters have been the greatest teachers to me, and personally and professionally. And so while I don't think that the workplace is like this family unit, but it is a place where we spend a lot of time, and it is a place where we want to invest in people, and it is a place where we want to see people be successful. But similar to a family unit, we may have some rough patches, but that means we just need to slow down and be intentional with our communication. I'm big on like, okay, let's try to figure out what the root issue is here, because we can dance around it all day, but guess what? It's still going to be the elephant in the room. Let's have enough grace. Let's have enough empathy to say, let's sit with this for a beat and figure out what we need to adjust, what that adjustment looks like, or whatever the turbulence that we're feeling. Because I heard someone say the day, every day is going to end. But it says, another saying is that every storm is going to run out of water, run out of rain. And so in that same concept, look, a couple of days from now, we're not even going to be thinking about this. But while we're here, it feels like a lot. It's a big emotion for us. But let's unpack it, because we're going to be better for it if we unpack it.
Well, honestly, that really gets back to empathy, and trying to truly understand, like, why are you feeling this way? What are the underlying dynamics? And sometimes, believe it or not, it's got nothing to do with you. It may not even have anything to do with work. It could be my mom is sick and I'm feeling a ton of pressure because my siblings aren't pitching in, blah, 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 whatever some story is. But that's true. And that's what they're actually feeling. And when you can take the time to and be available, that they trust you enough to kind of say, hey, John, here's what's really, really going on. Like, thank you for telling me. Let's figure out how to accommodate that. I can see you are under a lot of stress and it's popping out in different ways because it's going to pop out some way, somehow. So and you use the word grace. I think that's a really great word too.
Well, we talk about the relationships. You have to have relationships to even be able to pinpoint that. I'll never forget one of my professors from undergrad, Dr. Cynthia King. I was having just a rough semester. I probably was having writer's block, had a paper due, and I just had to start. I just couldn't get going. And she asked me, she said, well, John, how are you? I'm not going to lie about it. I sat there and cried like a baby because I just had all these emotions built up. But she simply asked me, how are you? This was like my senior year, and I just had a bit of a breakdown. But once I got that through and she talked to me, she coached me, I went home, wrote the paper, got a great grade on it. But you have to have a level of relationship and ability to understand and read people to know that, like, there's something else going on here. And so that's why I always like to make sure I'm checking in with people. I had a call with someone the other day, and I just thought I asked, like, hey, this has been great. It's like, how's your mental? How you holding up? How is life treating you? Because we can always talk about work, but how is life?
And
they said they said it was going well, but something moved me to say, like, let me check in with you because you're giving me this. And they said everything's going well, and I take their word for it. But at least I opened the door for that person to maybe say something different.
That's exactly right. And I know that you genuinely care. That is not a checkbox question.
No. And it's not an everyday question. You when you work with people, because we spend more time probably with our coworkers than we actually do awake at home with our family. So you understand their nonverbals. You pick up on these things, but do you have the courage to really say what's going on? And I'm not talking about work, but are you okay? And then sit back and leave room for them to respond. And then whatever they respond with, if they need a resource, or they need time, or if they need whatever it is, how can you help them in that moment? Because we all want psychological safety. And sometimes we get to that place of feeling that safety in a different manner, different cadence, different rhythm. But we want to make sure that people know that when they come to the workplace, we're a big part of your life. And we shouldn't have to suppress certain things because it's the workplace. If we're going through life and life is life, and how can we partner with you in that? And so that goes back to building a people first company culture. We had a conversation as a department the other day, and we were talking about bereavement leave. And, it came up, we're looking at our policy, and it's like, you have 3 days for XYZ if these people, are deceased. And we're like, that sounds very transactional. That doesn't feel like it has empathy and compassion in it. And so we're going through a study now, like, how should we phrase that? Because what we identified was that what it says here in this policy, it says that, but that's not actually what we do. If you've had some significant moment in your life, we're going to partner with you to give you the time and the resources you need. But if you read this handbook and you read this bereavement policy on your first day, you're like, okay, well, that's just a quick transaction. And we said, so if you're only seeing it for the first time, you don't know how we're actually doing it. And so I was like, we need to make sure that when people see it for the first time, they get a feel for our people first company culture. So we're going back and looking at the language. Is it compassion leave? I don't know what it is, and we're going to work through that. But we don't want it to feel like, hey, if you lost your mother, you get 2 days off of work to go take care of that, and we expect you back. So it's being intentional and making sure you're looking at the languages that is the language used in your policies and your manuals. How are you communicating to your employees? Because words matter.
Words do matter. I don't know if you heard during the little intro of this episode, but I was saying that we've got an innovation in the outplacement category that we call next placement. Okay. And one of the biggest losses you can go through life is losing your job. And sometimes turnover is involuntary. Sometimes it's got nothing to do with the employee. It's just business conditions. Things happen. and layoffs or whatever are very top of mind for a lot of people. And the insight was very much what you were just describing, is these are not cells on a spreadsheet. These are real people who've got to go home tonight and say, honey, I had a really bad day at work, and I'm afraid. I feel shame sometimes. I'm angry. But there's this whole grieving process that people need to go through, and they're not ready to go start working on the resume tomorrow morning or networking with people. And so that's what we've tried to do with Next Placement, is bring those mental health resources in community, because that's actually what people need initially when they're going through a loss. Similarly, what you're saying, like with the bereavement policy, is it's not quite that, 3 days you're over it, move on with your life because we need you back in tax accounting. It's like, no. And so I like how you said that, John, that, does our policy and the way it's worded actually reflect, one, how we behave, and two, we want people to know that we actually do care, and that this isn't just some XYZ, almost like the tax code, kind of a prescription for get over your grief.
Yes. I'll tell you, when I first joined NASCAR, I met with my team, one-on-one sessions, and I had a set list of questions I just kind of touched in with people on. And I said, what has been your greatest memory of your time working at NASCAR? And there was two themes that popped out. One was their experience at maybe their first Daytona 500 race, which is mind-blowing, the size of it, the energy that takes over the entire city of Daytona Beach. But the other one consistently was how the company wrapped their arms around them in a time of need. And that was a 2 thumbs up for me coming in. I never would have gotten that line of sight through an interview, but I'm hearing organic, real life stories of, hey, this happened to me. And without a doubt, I never questioned whether my job was in jeopardy. The company was there for me. My manager was there for me. And so you hear those reoccurring themes, and it's like, okay, that's special. You think about what makes your organization a great place to work and a great place to be from. Those are some of the nuances that not every organization can achieve.
Well, John, you're nailing so many things on the head. NASCAR is super fortunate to have you, and it sounds like you're super fortunate to have them as well. It sounds like a really good marriage. Normally, I like to wrap these up just talking a little bit about talent. When you're interviewing people, what are the talent attributes that either you respond to really well or you're specifically trying to uncover in a candidate?
For me, my philosophy in hiring is hire the attitude, train the skill. And I know that probably applies more to junior, entry, mid-level careers, but attitude is one of the most important things. We can teach you, we can coach you, but if you don't come to the table with just sort of that positive mindset, optimistic outlook, can-do spirit, that's hard to try to instill into someone. And I think even when you get to the higher levels where they have probably mastered a skill set, like, they can do the job, but it's the attitude, because then you think about what happens after, a deadline that took us a long time or an audit. Like, how do we click in those moments? Is this someone I want to spend time with? Because at this point, we know we can generally do the work, but are they people that you want to be around? And so again, I think the root there is attitude. So hire the attitude, train the skill.
Do you find, this is a personal thorn for me, is we say that a lot of times, and then often we'll see, though, in a job rec is tons of specific, you must have exactly this kind of stuff, and it's very hard skill, very experience based. That's less about aptitude and attitude. And again, I want my tax accountant to freaking know the tax laws and to keep me in compliance. But you're kind of this skills-based sort of approach that isn't necessarily related to a college degree, or you've got 14 years of exact experience doing this exact thing. How do you navigate kind of the compromise, if that's even the right word, for this attitude and aptitude versus, no, I kind of need you. You've done a lot of this, and that's actually what we're hiring for.
I definitely think skills-based hiring is important today. I don't think that you must or need to have a college degree for all roles. I think I would tell a lot of candidates, make sure you know how to articulate that story, though.
Yeah.
Because if you know that there's a gap between what they put on that technical list of minimum requirements, make sure that you intentionally speak to how your skill set still meets the needs and demands of that open position. And I would tell those that are in the hiring seat to make sure that they keep an open eye and stay curious, because what you see before I see your resume and through any of that is the attitude. What is their energy? What is their what vibe are they bringing to the space? And I think that is what you initially almost get attracted to, and then the other stuff kind of is in the wash. But figuring out how can you tell your story. There's data that says that men will apply for a job and not meet half the qualifications, and women will overanalyze it and maybe not apply. I'm a firm believer, never close the door on yourself. I want you to apply for a job. Make sure it makes sense. I mean, don't apply to be a general manager and you're right out of high school, but make sure it makes sense. But don't second guess yourself, because as an organization, I'm giving you what we need, but there's always going to be some concessions in that, because we may say, hey, this person has all of this. Just like in life, we have strength and we have opportunities and we have weaknesses. But if they give us 75% and we just need to coach up the other 25%, let's take a shot here.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate you saying that. And we try and teach our clients, our members, that, hey, these are almost always unicorn job descriptions. And if they're asking for the moon, they know they're very likely not going to get the moon. You made the point at the beginning when we were talking about transferable skills, right? But it's incumbent upon the candidate to really know the job description and the requirements, and to create the narrative that how their background, their skills, soft and hard, align with more than enough of that job. By the way, I really like what you guys do, and all those sorts of things. And you made another point just there at the last minute, was basically people hire people. We hire people we like, mostly, right? And do I somebody I want to be with when the going gets tough, right? And we're under the gun. Is this somebody I want to hang out with or not? And so, bringing that positive energy, but not being afraid. I love your expression, not closing the door on yourself. That's a good one. And but we find, and it's an interesting statistic. I think it's men is 60%, women is 85% of like, no, I need to at least meet this much of it. And women definitely overanalyze and disqualify themselves for things that they would have a very good shot at getting hired for if they could just get to the right person and get a shot.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. Last question. Furman. What's Furman's nickname again?
The Paladins. Go Dens.
What's a paladin?
Paladin is a knight on a horse.
Cool. Got it. Okay. So I've definitely learned something new today for my crossword puzzle stuff. What advice coming out of Furman? You talked about you did not intend to go into HR. HR kind of found you. But what advice would you give John now with the benefit of hindsight, career advice, or I like what you said, success advice?
Yes. I would say flow to where the opportunities are, and closed mouths don't get fed. So the flow to where the opportunities are, life isn't going to be scripted. So flow, but closed mouths don't get fed. Don't forget that you should advocate for yourself and the things that you want in life. Make sure you kind of speak it into existence. Let's manifest it. Like if you want to do something, make sure the people around you know. Don't expect them to be mind readers.
Closed mouths don't get fed. It's really interesting. We were, I did a webinar yesterday for a few dozen people who are job seekers. And they were like, hey, I'm getting a lot of interviews, but I'm not getting offers. Our experience is that people don't always do a great job of advocating for themselves, even in an interview. And the way that they tell the story, they sort of minimize their contribution in it. And sometimes that's, under the headline of, well, I don't want to brag, or, that feels obnoxious. But you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the interviewer to give them enough information to help them understand what your real contribution was. Like, don't be embarrassed about that. But it's just a manifestation of that was a closed mouth. And then, therefore, I don't know enough to make a confident decision. I'm going to end up offering the opportunity potentially to somebody who just told their story better than you did. And so
my wife was reading a book recently. I can't remember the title of it, but it talks about bragalogs. And it's sort of a concept of helping people that aren't always comfortable with promoting themselves or doing things. So she's like, it's a brag-a-log. An interview is a large and long brag-a-log. You should be trying to convey how you can contribute, what you have done, what your successes have been. And I always like to tell people, sometimes that's not natural for everyone, but there's missed moments, even when you're not interviewing, that you can be doing that. So I was at a session once, and I learned this tool of the trade, and it says, you get into these moments where there's small talk and people say, well, how are you? And you just say, oh, I'm fine. And you just kind of leave it there. You should start responding with, I'm excited to share. So if your CEO walks in and there's small things like, hey, John, how are you? I'm fine. No, I should say, I'm excited to share that we just completed our engagement survey and we achieved XYZ percentage and XYZ engagement. And this was my contribution. Or I'm proud to share that my daughter just graduated from college. Like, that's a moment for a quick line of sight to how you contribute, what's happening to you that you would normally just say, oh, I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
Ooh, brag-a-log.
Brag-a-log.
That is
I can't take credit for it. I need to find the author of the book, but it resonated with me. So when you have those moments, say, I'm excited to share. I'm proud to share. And tell them something that you've been doing.
I'm proud to share that we had John Ferguson, the CHRO of NASCAR, on with us today. John, you talked about bringing energy, right? And what's the vibe that you bring into a room? You bring positivity, enthusiasm, authenticity. So I've really, really enjoyed getting to know you. I love your message, and it's just been a real pleasure to have you today.
Hey, Bob, I appreciate you for the space and the time and the opportunity. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect at the SHRM annual conference, and I look forward to partnering with you down the road. Thank you so much.
We're going to do it. So thank you, everybody, for taking a few minutes to listen. John Ferguson's great. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will have another exciting guest coming up for you next week. But in the meantime, John, thank you so much, and enjoy your lovely family.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.